The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that changed everything. Mr. Austin Miller? This is Memorial Hospital. Your sister Emma has been in an accident. A hit and run. You need to get here now. The line went dead, and I stared at my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. 10 years in special forces had taught me to stay calm under pressure, but nothing prepares you for those words about family. Welcome to Betrayal Stories Lab, where trust breaks and heroes fight back. We'd love to know which city and country you are joining from today. Share with us now. Let's continue. My name is Austin Miller, and until that phone call, I was just another guy trying to live a quiet life. I owned a small security consulting business, helping local stores install cameras and alarm systems. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous. After a decade of classified missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, boring was exactly what I wanted. Emma was my baby sister, though at 22, she'd punch me for calling her that. She worked as a nurse at the Children's Hospital and lived in a tiny apartment downtown, always sending half her paycheck home to help Mom with the bills. Emma was the good one in our family, the one who saved lives instead of ending them. I threw on clothes and drove through empty streets, my mind racing. Hit and run meant someone had left her there to die. The soldier in me was already calculating response scenarios, but the brother in me was just terrified. Memorial Hospital's emergency room smelled like disinfectant and desperation. I found Dr. Patricia Wells at the nurse's station, her scrubs stained with what I hoped wasn't Emma's blood. Mr. Miller? I'm Dr. Wells. Your sister is in critical condition. How critical? Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, possible spinal damage. We've stabilized her for now, but the next 24 hours are crucial. Dr. Wells paused, studying my face. The impact was severe. Whoever hit her was going fast. Can I see her? Yes, but she's unconscious. The police want to speak with you as well. Emma looked so small in that hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped and hummed like electronic prayers. Her face was swollen beyond recognition, her left leg elevated in a complex traction device. I held her hand, careful not to disturb the foreline. I'm here, Em, I whispered. I'm going to find who did this. Detective Ray Jones appeared in the doorway, mid-40s, tired eyes, coffee-stained tie. Mr. Miller? I need to ask you some questions about your sister. We stepped into the hallway. What can you tell me about the accident? It happened around 1:30 a.m. on 5th Street, near the hospital. Your sister was walking home from her shift when a vehicle struck her from behind and kept going. Witnesses. 1. Homeless guy named Tommy who sleeps in the alley. Says he saw a dark sports car, maybe a Porsche or BMW. High-end vehicle, definitely. License plate. Detective Jones hesitated. Tommy was pretty shaken up. His description was limited. Something in his tone bothered me. What aren't you telling me, detective? Look, Mr. Miller, hit and runs are tough cases. Without solid evidence, it's hard to. There's security cameras on that street. I installed half of them myself. We're looking into that. You're looking into it? My sister is fighting for her life, and you're looking into it. Detective Jones sighed. I understand you're upset, but these investigations take time. We'll follow every lead. After he left, I sat with Emma until sunrise, watching her chest rise and fall with mechanical precision. Dr. Wells checked on her every hour, each visit bringing the same news, stable but critical. Around 7 a.m., my phone rang. Rachel, my ex-wife. Austin, I heard about Emma on the news. How is she? Not good. They don't know if she'll walk again. Oh God. What can I do? Nothing right now. I just need to focus on finding who did this. The police will handle it. The police are dragging their feet. Austin, don't do anything stupid. Emma needs you thinking clearly, not going off on some vigilante mission. Rachel knew me too well. She'd seen what happened when someone I loved got hurt. I'm not that person anymore, Ratch. Aren't you? After we hung up, I walked to the hospital cafeteria for coffee I didn't want. That's when I overheard two nurses talking at the next table. Did you hear about the accident on 5th Street? The hit and run? Yeah, terrible. My cousin works at the impound lot. Says they brought in a damaged BMW this morning. Front and all smashed up, registered to some rich family. Really? Did they arrest anyone? That's the weird part. The car got released within 2 hours. Some high-powered lawyers showed up with paperwork. I left my coffee untouched and walked back to Emma's room. She looked the same, broken, fragile, fighting for every breath. But something had changed in me during that 5-minute conversation. I pulled out my phone and called my old Army buddy Jake Morrison, who worked private security in the city. Jake, I need a favor. Can you access impound records? Austin, Jesus, it's been 2 years. What's going on? I told him about Emma, about the overheard conversation, about my gut feeling that someone with money and influence was already covering their tracks. Give me an hour, Jake said. If there's something to find, I'll find it. While I waited, I held Emma's hand and made her a promise she couldn't hear. Whoever did this thinks they can buy their way out of consequences. They're about to learn that some things can't be purchased. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. BMW 328i, registered to Derek Blackwood, son of billionaire Richard Blackwood. Car was reported stolen yesterday morning, found abandoned with front-end damage. Charges dropped. Vehicle released to family attorney. I stared at the text message, feeling something cold and familiar settle in my chest. Derek Blackwood. The name meant nothing to me, but it was about to become the most important name in my life. Emma's monitor began beeping erratically. Nurses rushed in, pushing me aside as they worked to stabilize her again. Dr. Wells appeared, checking readings and adjusting medications. What's happening? I asked. Internal bleeding. We need to get her back to surgery immediately. As they wheeled Emma away, I stood alone in that sterile hallway, watching my sister disappear behind operating room doors. The Blackwood family thought their money had made this problem disappear. They had no idea that the problem was just beginning. Emma's surgery lasted 4 hours. I spent every minute of it in that waiting room, researching Derek Blackwood on my phone. What I found made my blood boil. Derek Blackwood, 24 years old, heir to a billion-dollar construction empire. His social media showed a life of pure privilege. Yacht parties, exotic vacations, sports cars that cost more than most people's houses. The kid had never worked a day in his life, never faced a real consequence, never had to worry about anything except which Ferrari to drive to the country club. But it was the old news articles that really caught my attention. 3 DUI arrests in the past 2 years, all dismissed on technicalities. An assault charge from a bar fight that mysteriously disappeared when the victims suddenly refused to testify. A hit-and-run allegation from 18 months ago that never made it to trial because evidence was mishandled. This wasn't Derek's first time hurting someone and walking away clean. Dr. Wells emerged from surgery looking exhausted but relieved. The internal bleeding is under control. We've stabilized the spinal injury, but it's too early to know about permanent damage. She's alive, Mr. Miller. That's what matters right now. I thanked her and immediately called Detective Jones. I know who hit my sister. Mr. Miller, I told you we're investigating Derek Blackwood. The BMW was registered to him. I have the impound records. A long pause. How did you get impound records? That's not important. What's important is that you have a name, a vehicle, and physical evidence. When are you arresting him? It's not that simple. The vehicle was reported stolen before the accident occurred. Convenient timing. Look, Mr. Miller, I understand your frustration, but we have to follow proper procedures. Without witnesses placing Derek Blackwood behind the wheel, there was a witness. Tommy, the homeless man. Tommy's testimony wouldn't hold up in court. He was intoxicated, it was dark, and he admits he didn't see the driver clearly. I could hear it in his voice, the practiced deflection, the careful word choices. Detective Jones wasn't just dragging his feet. He was actively avoiding this case. Detective, are you planning to interview Derek Blackwood at all? We'll conduct our investigation thoroughly and professionally. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. After hanging up, I sat with Emma for another hour, holding her hand, and watching her breathe. The anger inside me was building, but it was controlled anger, the kind they trained into me during those 10 years of Special Forces missions. Cold, calculating, patient. I kissed Emma's forehead and drove across town to the Blackwood estate. The house sat on 20 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, surrounded by a stone wall that probably cost more than most people's entire homes. Iron gates with gold accents, security cameras every 50 feet, and a guardhouse that looked like it belonged at a military installation. I pressed the intercom button. Austin Miller to see Derek Blackwood. Do you have an appointment, sir? Tell him it's about the accident last night. 10 minutes later, the gates opened, and I drove up a circular driveway lined with fountains and sculptures that belonged in a museum. The house itself was a monument to excess. 3 stories of marble and glass that stretched across the hilltop like a small town. A woman in an expensive suit met me at the front door. Mr. Miller? I'm Victoria Chase, legal counsel for the Blackwood family. I understand you wanted to discuss some sort of accident. I want to discuss your client running down my sister and leaving her to die. Victoria's expression never changed. I'm afraid there's been some misunderstanding. Derek Blackwood was the victim of a car theft yesterday morning. He filed a police report, as did his insurance company. The stolen vehicle was later involved in an unfortunate accident, but Mr. Blackwood had nothing to do with that incident. Where is Derek now? Mr. Blackwood is not available for comment. However, I can tell you that he was at a private dinner party yesterday evening with several witnesses who can verify his whereabouts. A dinner party until 1:30 in the morning? The Blackwood family maintains an active social calendar. I have signed statements from multiple attendees confirming Derek's presence throughout the evening. I stepped closer to Victoria Chase, letting her see exactly who she was dealing with. Lady, I spent 10 years hunting terrorists who thought they could hide behind lawyers and money and connections. Your client hurt my family. That makes this personal. Mr. Miller, I would strongly advise against making threats against my client or his family. The Blackwoods have extensive resources to protect themselves from harassment. And I have extensive resources for finding people who hurt the people I love. Victoria handed me a business card. If you have any legitimate concerns about this matter, please contact my office. Good day, Mr. Miller. The gates closed behind me with a finality that felt like a challenge. As I drove home, my phone rang. Jake Morrison. Austin, we have a problem. I just got a call from my supervisor. Someone complained about me accessing those impound records. I'm being investigated for unauthorized use of department resources. Jake, I'm sorry. I never meant to. That's not the problem. The problem is the complaint came from the police department. Someone told them I was digging into the Blackwood case. Detective Jones? Has to be. Austin, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know what a cover-up looks like, and this is textbook. Someone with serious influence is making this case disappear. That night, I sat in Emma's hospital room and made phone calls. The first was to a lawyer I knew from my security business, a guy who specialized in personal injury cases. He listened to my story and agreed to take the case, but warned me that fighting the Blackwood family would be expensive and complicated. The second call was to my old commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Martinez, now retired and working as a private investigator in Washington, D.C. I told her about Emma, about Derek, about the suspicious police response. Austin, I've seen this before. Rich families, connected families, they have ways of making problems disappear. But they also have weak spots. Everyone does. What kind of weak spots? The kind that requires someone with your particular skills to find. How far are you willing to take this? I looked at Emma, still unconscious, still fighting for her life, and felt that familiar cold certainty settle over me like armor. As far as it takes. Then let's go hunting. The next morning, Detective Jones called with news that made everything clear. Mr. Miller, I wanted to update you on the investigation. We've determined that the evidence is insufficient to pursue charges at this time. The case is being filed as an unsolved hit and run. It's been less than 48 hours. Sometimes these cases move quickly when the evidence points in a clear direction. And what direction is that? Unfortunately, away from any prosecutable suspect. After hanging up, I realized the truth that should have been obvious from the beginning. Derek Blackwood wasn't just some rich kid who thought he could buy his way out of consequences. He was a rich kid whose family had already bought their way out of consequences, and they'd bought the entire system to make sure it stayed that way. Emma had been unconscious for 6 days when the first hospital bill arrived. $87,000 for emergency surgery, intensive care, and specialized equipment. My insurance would cover maybe half of that, if I was lucky. I sat in the hospital cafeteria, staring at numbers that might as well have been written in a foreign language. My construction business made decent money, but this kind of debt would destroy us. The follow-up surgeries Dr. Wells mentioned would cost another $100,000, minimum. Rachel called while I was trying to figure out how to explain bankruptcy to our 8-year-old daughter. "Austin, you need to come home. Now." "What's wrong?" "There are men in suits at our front door. They say they're serving legal papers." I was in my truck before she finished talking. Driving through downtown traffic like every red light was a personal insult. The military instincts I'd spent 2 years trying to suppress were waking up, and that scared me almost as much as Emma's condition. I pulled into our driveway to find Rachel standing on the porch, holding an envelope with our daughter Lucy hiding behind her legs. 2 men in expensive suits were walking back to a black sedan that screamed corporate lawyer. "What did they want?" I asked. Rachel handed me the envelope. "They said if you keep harassing the Blackwood family, they'll sue us for everything we own." The legal documents were exactly what I expected, a cease and desist order claiming I was engaged in harassment, stalking, and defamation against Derek Blackwood. The threat was clear: one more attempt to contact Derek or his family, and they'd take our house, my business, and everything else we'd worked for. "Austin, maybe we should listen to them," Rachel said after I explained what the papers meant. "Maybe the police will figure this out without you getting involved." "The police have already given up, Ratch. Detective Jones told me himself. Case closed." "So what's your plan?" "Fight a billionaire family in court while Emma's medical bills destroy us financially." She wasn't wrong, and that made her words hurt worse. "My plan is to not let some rich kid get away with destroying our sister's life." "Your sister, not ours, and not Lucy's." Rachel looked at our daughter, who was still clinging to her leg. "Lucy, go inside and play. Mommy and Daddy need to talk." After Lucy disappeared into the house, Rachel's calm facade cracked. "This isn't Afghanistan, Austin. You can't solve this problem by out-fighting the bad guys." "I'm not planning to fight anyone." "Aren't you?" "Because you've got that look again. The same look you had when you came back from deployment, when you'd disappear for hours and come home with scraped knuckles and stories you couldn't tell me." I wanted to deny it, but Rachel knew me too well. The Blackwood family had declared war on us the moment Derek decided to leave Emma bleeding on that street. They just didn't realize yet that they'd chosen the wrong enemy. That night, after Rachel and Lucy went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and called my lawyer, Michael Torres. He'd handled the legal work when I started my security business, and I trusted him to give me straight answers. "Austin, I'll be honest with you. Fighting the Blackwood family is career suicide. They have unlimited resources and connections throughout the legal system. Even if you're completely right, they can drag this out until you're bankrupt. What if I can prove Derek was driving that car? You'd need video evidence, multiple credible witnesses, or a confession. And even then, their lawyers will argue evidence tampering, witness intimidation, anything to create reasonable doubt. So they just win? Rich kid destroys someone's life and walks away clean. Austin, that's not how I want the world to work, but it's how the world does work. I'm sorry. After hanging up, I did something I hadn't done in months. I pulled out my old military gear from the basement. The equipment was still there, carefully maintained and stored. Night vision goggles, surveillance equipment, tactical clothing that made me invisible in shadows. I wasn't planning to hurt anyone, but the Blackwood family had made this personal. If they wanted to play intimidation games, they were about to learn what real intimidation looked like. The next morning brought more bad news. My business partner, Dave, called with barely concealed panic in his voice. "Austin, we've got problems. 3 of our biggest clients just canceled their contracts. No explanation, no warning, just terminated, effective immediately." "Which clients?" "Morrison Construction, Patterson Security, and Westfield Properties." I knew those names. All 3 companies had contracts with Blackwood Construction. The message was clear. Richard Blackwood owned enough of this town to destroy my livelihood whenever he wanted. "Dave, can we survive without those contracts?" "For maybe 2 months. After that, we'll have to shut down." When I got home that afternoon, I found Rachel packing suitcases in our bedroom. "Where are you going?" "Lucy and I are staying with my sister in Phoenix until this is over." She wouldn't look at me. "I can't watch you destroy our family fighting a battle you can't win." "Rachel, please. I need you right now." "No, Austin. You need revenge right now. And I won't let our daughter watch you choose that over us." After Rachel and Lucy left, I sat alone in our empty house, feeling the weight of isolation that came with fighting powerful enemies. But as darkness fell, my training kicked in completely. I swept the house systematically, looking for anything out of place. In the basement, behind the water heater, I found it. A small electronic device, no bigger than a matchbook, with a blinking red light. Professional surveillance equipment. Someone had been listening to every conversation, monitoring every plan, tracking every move I'd made since Emma's accident. The Blackwood family wasn't just buying their way out of consequences. They were watching me, learning my weaknesses, preparing to destroy everything I cared about before I could threaten their perfect life. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They were treating me like a desperate civilian instead of a decorated special forces operative who'd spent 10 years hunting people who thought they were untouchable. Finding that surveillance device changed everything. The Blackwood family had made this a tactical operation, which meant I could finally fight back using skills they didn't know I possessed. I left the bug exactly where I found it. Derek left his family's estate every day at 2 p.m., drove his backup Porsche to the same upscale gym, then spent evenings at 3 different bars in the expensive part of town. I followed him for 4 days, staying invisible in traffic, documenting everything with long-range cameras. Derek wasn't acting like someone haunted by guilt over hitting a pedestrian. He was acting like someone who'd already forgotten it happened. On Thursday night, Derek met with 2 other young men at Russo's bar, a place that charged $30 for cocktails and catered to people who'd never worked for their money. I positioned myself across the street with surveillance equipment that could pick up conversations through glass windows. I heard he's been asking questions. Derek laughed, actually laughed, about Emma's condition. "Austin Miller? He's nobody. Blue-collar guy with a failed marriage and a failing business. Dad's people are already destroying his life financially. By Christmas, he'll be too busy filing for bankruptcy to worry about some accident." The casual cruelty in Derek's voice told me everything I needed to know about who I was fighting. This wasn't just about covering up a hit and run. Derek genuinely didn't care that Emma might never walk again. But then Derek said something that changed the entire game. "Besides, this isn't even the worst thing I've gotten away with. Remember that thing in Miami 2 years ago? The boat accident. Wasn't an accident. I was drunk, took out 3 kayakers, and Dad's people made it disappear just like this. Money talks, and poor people don't. I had my phone recording every word." Derek Blackwood had just confessed to multiple hit-and-runs, including one that apparently involved fatalities. The Miami incident hadn't appeared in any of my research, which meant the Blackwood family's cover-up machine was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. The next morning, I visited Colonel Martinez at her private investigation office in Washington. The drive took 6 hours, but seeing her again reminded me why I'd survived 10 years of combat missions. "Austin, you look like hell," she said, studying my face across her desk. "How long since you've slept?" "Sleep's overrated. What did you find on Derek Blackwood?" Sarah handed me a thick file. More than you probably want to know. The Miami incident you asked me to research? 3 college students killed in a boating accident 2 years ago. Derek was driving while intoxicated, but somehow the investigation concluded the kayakers were at fault. How is that possible? Same way this current case is being buried. The Blackwood family doesn't just buy lawyers. They buy judges, prosecutors, and police chiefs. They've been doing it for 30 years. I opened the file and found police reports that had been sealed, witness statements that contradicted official findings, and photographs of Derek's boat showing impact damage that mysteriously disappeared from evidence. Sarah, there's something else. Derek is planning to leave the country. Her expression sharpened. How do you know that? I've been watching him. Yesterday, he visited 3 different travel agencies, paid cash for something, and had a long meeting with his father's accountant. My gut says they're moving money offshore and preparing to disappear Derek until this blows over. Austin, if Derek flees the country, he'll never face justice for what he did to Emma. Rich families have safe houses in non-extradition countries. He could live comfortably in Switzerland or Monaco while your sister recovers from injuries that will affect her for life. That afternoon, Sarah introduced me to someone who changed everything. FBI agent Maria Santos, who specialized in cases involving public corruption and organized crime families. Mr. Miller, Colonel Martinez has briefed me on your situation. I'll be honest, we've been watching the Blackwood family for 3 years, waiting for the right case to build a federal investigation. What kind of federal investigation? Conspiracy to obstruct justice, witness tampering, bribery of public officials. The Miami case you uncovered gives us probable cause to examine their entire operation. Agent Santos explained that local law enforcement couldn't touch the Blackwood family because they owned too many people in the system. But federal charges would bypass local corruption and put Derek in front of judges the family couldn't buy. What do you need from me? I asked. Everything you've gathered, plus continued surveillance while we prepare warrants. But Mr. Miller, you need to understand, once we move forward with this, the Blackwood family will know you're the source. They'll escalate their attacks on your family. I thought about Emma, still unconscious in her hospital bed, fighting for her life because some rich kid couldn't be bothered to stop after destroying her future. Agent Santos, they already destroyed my family. Now it's time to return the favor. That night, I drove home with a federal investigation brewing and concrete evidence of Derek's pattern of violence. But as I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My neighbor Mrs. Peterson was watering her garden, and she waved me over with obvious concern. Austin, honey, you had some visitors today. Men in suits, asking questions about your work schedule and whether you traveled out of town recently. What kind of questions? They wanted to know if you'd been acting strange, if you'd mentioned any trips to Miami or Washington. They said they were investigating some kind of fraud. The Blackwood family had figured out I was building a case against them. They were already working to discredit me before I could present evidence to federal authorities. But as I walked into my house, I found something even more disturbing. An envelope slipped under my door with Derek's travel itinerary inside. First-class tickets to Switzerland, departing in exactly 48 hours. Derek Blackwood was running, and I had less than 2 days to stop him. I called Agent Santos at 6 a.m., 46 hours before Derek's flight to Switzerland. We have a problem, I said. Derek's running, and his family knows I've been building a case against them. How do you know they know? Because they're already trying to discredit me, asking neighbors about trips to Miami and Washington, claiming I'm under investigation for fraud. Agent Santos was quiet for a moment. Mr. Miller, the Blackwood family is more dangerous than you realize. Richard Blackwood doesn't just buy lawyers. He owns pieces of law enforcement agencies across 3 states. What does that mean for the federal case? It means we move fast, or we lose everything. 2 hours later, I met Agent Santos at a diner outside city limits. She looked like she hadn't slept, and I could see why when she showed me what she'd uncovered overnight. Austin, The corruption goes deeper than we thought. Detective Jones isn't just lazy. He's been receiving payments from Blackwood Construction for 2 years. Judge Catherine Wells, who would have handled Derek's arraignment, has a son who works directly for Richard Blackwood. So the fix was already in before Emma got hit. The fix has been in for decades. But here's what they don't know. We've been building a parallel case using federal resources. When Derek tries to board that plane tomorrow, federal marshals will be waiting. The relief I felt lasted exactly 30 seconds, until Agent Santos explained the catch. We need one more piece of evidence to guarantee conviction. Derek's confession at the bar is good, but his lawyers will claim the recording is inadmissible. We need something that directly connects Derek to the scene at the time of impact. What kind of something? Witness testimony from someone who was there. Someone credible. The homeless guy Tommy won't hold up in court. You said so yourself. Not Tommy. Your sister. My heart stopped. Emma's been unconscious for 9 days. Has she? According to Dr. Wall's latest medical notes, Emma has shown signs of consciousness for the past 48 hours. Brief moments, but she's responding to stimuli. I was in my truck driving to the hospital before Agent Santos finished explaining the legal implications. If Emma could identify Derek, if she remembered any detail about the car or the driver, it would seal the case. But first, she had to wake up. I found Dr. Wells in Emma's room, checking monitors and adjusting medication. Emma looked the same, pale, fragile, surrounded by machines, but something felt different. Doctor, Agent Santos said Emma might be regaining consciousness. She's showing increased brain activity, moving her eyes in response to voices, slight movement in her fingers when we test reflexes. It's possible she's been aware of more than we realized. I pulled a chair next to Emma's bed and took her hand. Em, it's Austin. If you can't hear me, squeeze my fingers. Nothing happened for 30 seconds. Then, so faintly I almost missed it, I felt pressure against my palm. Emma, squeeze again if you can hear me. This time the squeeze was stronger, more deliberate. Dr. Wells moved closer, checking Emma's vital signs as they began showing increased activity. Emma, you were hurt in an accident. Do you remember anything about that night? Emma's eyes fluttered open, just for a moment, but long enough for me to see recognition there. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper so quiet I had to lean close to hear. Black car. That's right, Em. A black car hit you. Do you remember anything else? Emma's grip on my hand tightened. Her lips moved again, and this time I caught more words. 2 people arguing. My blood went cold. Derek hadn't been alone in that car. Emma, there were 2 people in the car. She managed a barely visible nod. Fighting, about stopping. Dr. Wells was taking notes, documenting everything for medical and legal purposes. But Emma wasn't finished. License plate. Emma whispered, her voice getting stronger. Numbers, saw numbers. I was already reaching for my phone to call Agent Santos when Emma said something that changed everything. Girl, said leave her. The room went silent except for the beeping monitors. Emma had just revealed that Derek Blackwood had a female passenger who told him to leave her dying on that street. But before I could ask more questions, alarms started going off. Emma's vital signs spiked dangerously, and nurses rushed in as her body began convulsing. What's happening? I shouted over the chaos. Seizure, Dr. Wells called out, pushing me away from the bed. Her brain is swelling from the increased activity. We need to sedate her immediately. As they worked to stabilize Emma, my phone rang. Jake Morrison, my old army buddy. Austin, we have bigger problems. I just got word from my contacts in federal law enforcement. There's a kill order out on you. What the hell does that mean? It means Richard Blackwood isn't planning to discredit you or destroy you financially. He's planning to have you eliminated before you can testify. Through the hospital room window, I could see 2 men in suits talking to someone at the nurse's station, flashing badges and asking questions about room numbers. Jake, I need backup. Now. Already on the way. You've got 6 former Special Forces operators heading to your location. But Austin, These aren't street thugs coming after you. Blackwood hired professional contractors. As Emma's seizure finally stopped and her vitals stabilized, one crucial fact echoed in my mind. Derek Blackwood had a female passenger who witnessed Emma's hit and run and told him to flee. That passenger was either going to be our star witness or our biggest threat, and I had less than 24 hours to figure out which. The two men in suits were getting closer to Emma's room when Jake Morrison appeared beside me like a ghost. 6 years of special forces training never really leaves you, and Jake still moved like he could disappear into shadows at will. Austin, we need to go. Now. I'm not leaving Emma. Those aren't cops asking questions at the nurse's station. They're private contractors, and they're armed. Through the window, I watched one of the men flash what looked like a federal badge to a nurse. But something about his posture, the way he scanned the hallway while talking, screamed military contractor rather than law enforcement. Jake, Emma just told me Derek had a passenger. A girl who told him to leave her there. Jake's expression hardened. That changes everything. If there was a witness in the car who can identify Derek as the driver, or a witness who's part of the cover-up. Dr. Wells approached cautiously, clearly sensing the tension. Mr. Miller, your sister is stable, but I need to ask you something privately. We stepped into the hallway, staying close to Emma's room, but out of sight from the men who were now questioning security guards. 2 hours ago, I received a call from the hospital administrator, Dr. Wells said quietly. Someone claiming to be from your insurance company asked detailed questions about Emma's treatment, her chances of recovery, and specifically whether she'd regained consciousness. What did you tell them? Nothing. But Mr. Miller, that wasn't your insurance company. I called them directly to confirm, and they never made that inquiry. The Blackwood family was tracking Emma's condition, waiting to see if she could identify Derek, which meant they knew she was their biggest threat. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Santos. Meet me at the federal building. 1 hour. Bring everything. But as I showed the text to Jake, another message appeared. Change of plans. Someone leaked our investigation. My supervisor just shut down the Blackwood case. Jake read over my shoulder. Austin, they got to the FBI too. That's impossible. Richard Blackwood owns construction contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You don't think he has people in federal agencies? The two contractors were asking for directions to Emma's room now, their fake badges apparently working on the hospital staff. We had maybe 3 minutes before they found us. Jake, I need you to stay with Emma. Don't let anyone near her who isn't medical staff you've personally verified. Where are you going? To find out who was in that car with Derek. I took the stairs down to the parking garage, using every counter-surveillance technique I'd learned in Afghanistan. But instead of heading to my truck, I doubled back through the building's service entrance, making my way to the hospital's records department. 20 minutes later, I had what I needed, security camera footage from the night Emma was hit, pulled from traffic cameras along 5th Street. The hospital's IT guy, a veteran named Carlos who recognized my military bearing, gave me access to the system after I explained what happened to Emma. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Derek's BMW, captured by 3 different cameras, showed 2 silhouettes in the front seats. The passenger was definitely female, and in one frame, as they passed under a streetlight, I could make out blonde hair and what looked like expensive jewelry. But it was the license plate that gave me the second piece of the puzzle. As Derek fled the scene, the car passed directly under a traffic camera with high-resolution capability. The plate was clearly visible, but it wasn't the BMW registration I'd seen in the impound records. The car had been using stolen plates. I drove to Agent Santos' office anyway, hoping she had more information before the case got buried completely. But when I arrived at the federal building, the receptionist told me Agent Santos was unavailable and suggested I contact my local police department for any criminal matters. The fix was in at every level. That's when I called Colonel Martinez from the parking lot. Sarah, the federal case just got shut down. Agent Santos has been pulled off the investigation. Austin, I've been making calls since we last spoke. The corruption goes higher than we thought. Judge Catherine Wells isn't just connected to the Blackwood family through business. Her son Michael was arrested for cocaine possession 2 months ago. What does that have to do with Emma? Michael Wells drives a silver Porsche, but he also has access to his girlfriend's car, a black BMW that matches the description of Derek's vehicle. The pieces were falling into place like a nightmare puzzle. Sarah, are you saying Judge Wells' son was Derek's passenger? I'm saying Michael Wells has a girlfriend named Ashley Pierce who owns a BMW identical to Derek's. And Ashley Pierce works for a high-end escort service that caters to wealthy young men. My blood went cold. Derek was with a prostitute when he hit Emma. A prostitute whose client list includes sons of judges, prosecutors, and police officials. Austin, this isn't just about covering up one hit and run. This is about protecting an entire network of corruption. I sat in my truck outside the federal building, staring at the traffic camera footage on my phone, finally understanding the scope of what Emma and I were up against. Derek Blackwood wasn't just some rich kid who thought he could buy his way out of consequences. He was part of a criminal network that involved judges' sons, police officials, and federal agents, all connected through money, blackmail, and mutual protection. Ashley Pierce had been in that car when Derek hit Emma. She'd told him to keep driving because she knew exactly which phone calls to make to ensure the whole incident disappeared. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed Emma would die from her injuries, taking her testimony with her. Emma was alive, she was talking, and she'd seen both Derek and Ashley clearly. The question now was whether I could keep Emma alive long enough to tell her story. I raced back to the hospital, knowing that every minute Emma remained conscious made her a bigger target. The traffic camera footage of Ashley Pierce was burning a hole in my phone. Proof that Derek hadn't been alone, but proof that might get Emma killed if the wrong people found out she could identify both passengers. Jake met me in the hospital parking garage, his face grim. Austin, we've got problems. Those contractors asking questions about Emma? They weren't just gathering intel. They were mapping the hospital's security protocols. For what? Either to grab Emma or to silence her permanently. We took the service elevator to Emma's floor, avoiding the main hallways where hospital security might have been compromised. But when we reached her room, Dr. Wells was waiting with news that changed everything. Mr. Miller, your sister's condition has improved dramatically. She's been conscious for over an hour, and she's asking for you. Emma was sitting up when I entered her room, still connected to monitors, but alert and focused in ways I hadn't seen since before the accident. The swelling in her face had reduced enough that she looked like my little sister again. Austin, she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard in days. I remember everything about that night. Em, don't push yourself. We have time. No, we don't. Emma gripped my hand with surprising strength. I heard those men asking questions at the nurse's station. They're not police, are they? Jake positioned himself by the door while I pulled a chair close to Emma's bed. What do you remember about the car that hit you? It was a black BMW, but the license plates were wrong. I noticed because I'd seen that same car earlier that evening parked outside the hospital with different plates. My blood ran cold. You'd seen Derek's car before? Not Derek's car. The girl's car. She'd been waiting in the parking lot for over an hour, like she was watching someone. Emma described Ashley Pierce in detail. Blonde hair, expensive jewelry, designer clothes that cost more than most people's monthly salary. But it was what Emma heard during the impact that made everything clear. After they hit me, I was conscious for maybe 30 seconds before everything went black. The girl was screaming at the driver to stop, to help me. But then she got a phone call. What kind of phone call? Someone called her, and I heard her say it's done, but there's a witness problem. Then she told the driver to keep going, that someone would handle the cleanup. Ashley Pierce hadn't just been a passenger in Derek's car. She'd been the one coordinating the cover-up while Emma lay dying in the street. Emma, did you hear anything else? Any names, any details about who she was talking to? She called someone Judge. Said, Judge, we have a problem, right before they drove away. Judge Catherine Wells. Ashley Pierce had called Derek's accomplice's mother immediately after the hit and run, setting the cover-up in motion while Emma's blood was still wet on the BMW's bumper. Jake's radio crackled with a report from one of our former Special Forces teammates positioned in the hospital lobby. 2 more contractors just entered the building. Professional-grade equipment, moving with purpose toward the elevator bank. Emma, we need to get you out of here. Now. But Dr. Wells shook her head. Mr. Miller, your sister can't be moved safely. Her spinal injuries are still unstable, and disconnecting her from these monitors could be fatal. Then we make our stand here, Jake said, checking his sidearm. Austin, how many of our people can we get here in the next 10 minutes? Before I could answer, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Austin Miller. Mr. Miller, this is Richard Blackwood. I believe we need to have a conversation. I put the phone on speaker so Jake and Emma could hear. Mr. Blackwood, I was wondering when you'd call directly. My son Derek tells me you've been spreading lies about him being involved in your sister's unfortunate accident. I'm calling to offer you a resolution that benefits everyone involved. What kind of resolution? I'm prepared to cover all of your sister's medical expenses, plus a settlement of $2 million. In exchange for your agreement that this was a tragic hit and run with no identified suspect. Emma's eyes flashed with anger, but I kept my voice steady. And if I refuse your generous offer? Mr. Miller, you're a businessman. You understand that sometimes problems require permanent solutions. Your sister's recovery has been remarkable, but hospital equipment can malfunction. Medications can be mislabeled. Accidents happen, especially to witnesses who might testify about things they didn't actually see clearly. The threat was unmistakable. Accept the money or watch Emma die from a medical error. Mr. Blackwood, I spent 10 years in Special Forces hunting people who thought they could buy or kill their way out of justice. Your son destroyed my sister's life, and now you're threatening to finish the job. I'm offering you a business transaction. $2 million for your silence and your sister's discretion. Emma reached for the phone. Mr. Blackwood? This is Emma Miller. Miss Miller, how wonderful to hear your voice. I trust you're recovering well. I'm recovering well enough to testify that your son Derek was driving the car that hit me, and that Ashley Pierce was in the passenger seat coordinating a cover-up before I even lost consciousness. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for 10 seconds. Miss Miller, you were severely injured. Head trauma can cause false memories, hallucinations. I saw your son's face clearly when he looked back at me lying in the street. I heard Ashley Pierce tell someone called Judge that there was a witness problem. And I remember the license plate number of the car that hit me. Miss Miller, I'm going to give you some advice. Memory is a fragile thing. Sometimes it's better to forget painful experiences and focus on healing. Jake held up 3 fingers, indicating the contractors were 3 floors below and climbing. We were running out of time. Mr. Blackwood, I said, here's some advice for you. I spent 10 years learning how to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Your son hurt my family. That makes this personal. Mr. Miller, you're making a terrible mistake. My family has resources you can't imagine. And I have skills your family can't imagine. I hung up and turned to Jake. How long until backup arrives? 6 minutes. Can we hold this room for 6 minutes? Emma looked at both of us with a determination I remembered from when we were kids. You're not holding this room. We're holding this room. Someone get me a weapon. Dr. Wells looked at Emma like she'd lost her mind. Miss Miller, you're in no condition to. Doctor, I'm a trauma nurse who's been lying in this bed for 10 days listening to people plan my murder. Emma interrupted, her voice stronger than it had been since the accident. Get me something I can use to defend myself, or get out of my way. Jake tossed Emma a medical scalpel from the instrument tray. It's not much, but it's sharp. It'll do. Emma gripped the scalpel with steady hands, her nurse training kicking in despite her injuries. Austin, how many contractors are coming? At least 4, maybe more. I checked the hallway through the door's window. They'll be here in 3 minutes. Then we don't wait for them to come to us. Emma was right. and my military training agreed with her logic. Defensive positions only work when you can't be overwhelmed by superior numbers. But these contractors didn't know they were hunting a decorated Special Forces operative and his sister, who'd spent 10 years treating combat wounds in emergency situations. Jake, can you get to the building's fire control system? What are you thinking? Smoke and confusion. Make them think there's a real emergency, so they can't tell which evacuees are targets and which are just scared civilians. Jake disappeared into the hallway while I helped Emma disconnect from her monitors without triggering alarms. Dr. Wells watched in horror as Emma stood up for the first time since the accident, wobbling but determined. "Mr. Miller, your sister has serious spinal injuries. This could cause permanent paralysis." "Doctor, staying here will cause permanent death," Emma replied, steadying herself against the bed rail. "I'll take paralysis over assassination." The fire alarms started blaring throughout the hospital, followed by automated announcements about evacuation procedures. Within seconds, we could hear nurses and staff moving through the halls, helping patients evacuate according to emergency protocols. Perfect chaos. I grabbed a wheelchair and helped Emma sit down. You're now Patricia Wells, a patient being evacuated by her brother. Keep your head down and don't speak unless someone asks you a direct medical question." "What about you?" "I'm going hunting." Jake reappeared as hospital staff began evacuating the floor. "Austin, our backup is still 4 minutes out, but I've got good news." The contractors split up. 2 are coming up the main elevator, 2 took the stairs. "That's not good news. That's tactical intelligence." I handed Jake the wheelchair with Emma. "Get her to the parking garage. Wait for our team, then get her somewhere safe." "Where are you going?" "To teach some corporate mercenaries why you don't hunt Special Forces operators on their home ground." I moved through the chaos like a ghost, using evacuating patients and staff as cover while I positioned myself between the contractors and Emma's escape route. The building's evacuation procedures worked in our favor. Everyone was moving in predictable patterns, following marked exit routes that I'd memorized during 10 days of sitting with Emma. The first contractor I encountered was professional but overconfident. He was dressed like a paramedic, probably planning to blend in with emergency responders, but his tactical boots and the way he scanned corners gave him away immediately. I let him pass me in a crowd of evacuating nurses, then followed him into an empty patient room. The encounter lasted 15 seconds and ended with him unconscious in a hospital bed, zip-tied with medical tubing. 1 down, at least 3 to go. The second contractor was smarter. He positioned himself at the stairwell exit, checking faces of everyone evacuating while staying out of sight from hospital security. But he made the mistake of focusing on the evacuation flow instead of watching his back. I approached from the opposite stairwell, coming up behind him as he watched Jake while Emma passed his position 30 feet away. The contractor started to move, probably recognizing Emma despite our disguise, but never got the chance. Military combatives training is designed for exactly these situations: quick, silent, efficient. The contractor was unconscious before he knew I was there. 2 down. But as I zip-tied the second contractor, my phone buzzed with a text that made my blood run cold. "Austin Miller, we know where you are. We know where your sister is going. Surrender now, or watch everyone you love die." The message included a photo of Rachel and Lucy at Rachel's sister's house in Phoenix. Someone had found my ex-wife and daughter despite their attempt to hide from this mess. Richard Blackwood wasn't just hunting me anymore. He was threatening to kill my entire family unless I gave up. I called Jake immediately. Change of plans. They found Rachel and Lucy in Phoenix. How is that possible? Money, resources, connections we don't have. I was moving toward the parking garage, staying in the evacuation crowds. "Jake, get Emma to the safe house, then coordinate with our Phoenix contacts. Rachel and Lucy need protection now. What about you? I'm going to end this once and for all." But as I reached the parking garage, I realized the Blackwood family had been planning this confrontation longer than I'd imagined. The garage was filled with evacuating patients and staff, but standing among them were at least 6 more contractors, all dressed as emergency responders, all positioned to control every exit. They hadn't just come to kill Emma. They'd come to eliminate our entire support network in one coordinated operation. My phone rang. Richard Blackwood again. Mr. Miller, I trust you received our message about your family in Phoenix. If you hurt them, they won't be hurt if you make the right choice. Walk to the white van in the parking garage's northeast corner. Come alone. No weapons. No backup. Just a father who wants his family to live. Through the garage's chaos, I could see the white van. 2 contractors stood beside it, watching the evacuation crowd for my approach. And if I refuse, then your daughter Lucy will learn what happens to families who interfere with Blackwood business. The threat was clear, and it worked. Rachel and Lucy were innocent. They hadn't chosen this fight, and they didn't deserve to die for Emma's hit and run. But as I started walking toward that white van, ready to surrender myself to save my family, Jake's voice crackled through my earpiece. Austin, don't do it. It's a trap. I know it's a trap, Jake. But they have Rachel and Lucy. No, they don't. I just got confirmation from our Phoenix team. Your ex-wife and daughter are safe. That photo was taken 3 weeks ago from social media. Richard Blackwood had been bluffing, using old photographs to manipulate me into surrendering, which meant I could stop playing defense and start playing offense. Knowing that Rachel and Lucy were safe changed everything. The white van in the parking garage's northeast corner wasn't my surrender point anymore. It was my hunting ground. I moved through the evacuating crowd with predatory focus, counting contractors and identifying their positions. 6 men, all dressed as emergency responders, all carrying concealed weapons, all expecting me to walk meekly into their trap. They were about to learn why Special Forces operators don't surrender. The first contractor I targeted was positioned near the parking garage's main exit, watching for Emma's wheelchair. He was good, professional stance, alert eyes, constantly scanning the crowd. But he made the classic mistake of focusing outward instead of watching his 6. I approached from behind during a surge of evacuating hospital staff, slipping a zip tie around his wrist and pulling him behind a concrete support pillar in one fluid motion. The encounter lasted 8 seconds and ended with him unconscious and secured to a drainage pipe. 5 left. The second contractor was smarter, positioning himself with his back to a wall and clear sight lines in multiple directions. But superior positioning doesn't help when someone with 10 years of urban warfare experience decides you're a target. I used the parking garage's fire sprinkler system, activated by Jake's earlier alarm, to create visual cover. Water cascading from overhead pipes made it difficult for the contractor to track movement, giving me the concealment I needed to close distance. This one fought back, trained, competent, dangerous. But he'd learned his skills in corporate security courses, while I'd learned mine in Fallujah and Kandahar. The fight ended with him zip-tied to a car's bumper, nursing a dislocated shoulder. For contractors remaining, and they were starting to realize their prey had become their predator. My phone buzzed with another call from Richard Blackwood. I answered while moving toward the third contractor's position. Mr. Miller, you're making this much more complicated than necessary. Mr. Blackwood, you tried to threaten my daughter with a fake photograph. That was your second mistake. What was my first mistake? Thinking money could buy you safety from someone whose family you destroyed. I ended the call and focused on contractor number 3. This one had positioned himself near the white van, probably coordinating the operation through radio communication with his team. But radios work both ways, and Jake had been listening to their communications frequency for the past 10 minutes. Austin, Jake's voice crackled through my earpiece. Remaining contractors are regrouping at the van. They know you're hunting them, and they're calling for backup. How much backup? At least 12 more men, maybe 15. Full tactical team with military-grade equipment. The situation was escalating beyond what Emma and I could handle alone. We needed federal intervention, real federal intervention, not the corrupted local version that had been protecting the Blackwood family. That's when my phone rang with a number I hadn't expected to see again, Agent Maria Santos. Mr. Miller, I know my supervisor shut down the Blackwood investigation, but I never stopped working the case. Agent Santos, where are you? Outside the hospital with a federal warrant for Derek Blackwood's arrest. The Miami case you helped uncover gave us probable cause for a larger investigation into public corruption. Derek's supposed to flee to Switzerland tonight. Not anymore. Federal marshals arrested him 20 minutes ago at the airport. We also have Ashley Pierce in custody, and she's already started talking. Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. If Derek was in custody, his father would be desperate to eliminate any witnesses who could testify against him. Agent Santos, Emma identified both Derek and Ashley as being in the car during the hit and run. She's the key witness you need. Then we need to get her to a secure federal facility immediately. But as I said those words, alarms started blaring from inside the hospital. Not fire alarms, but medical emergency signals coming from Emma's floor. Dr. Wells' voice came over the hospital's intercom system. Code Blue, Room 314. Code Blue, Room 314. Room 314 was Emma's room. I was running toward the hospital entrance when Jake's voice stopped me cold. Austin, don't. It's a trap. Emma's not in that room anymore. What do you mean? I got her out during the evacuation, remember? She's safe at the federal safe house with our team. That code blue is being broadcast to draw you back into the building where Blackwood's contractors can corner you. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Richard Blackwood was using the hospital's own emergency systems to manipulate me, counting on my protective instincts to override my tactical training. Jake, where exactly is Emma? Secure federal facility, 20 miles outside the city. Agent Santos arranged it. But Austin, there's something else you need to know. What? Emma's injuries are worse than Dr. Wells initially thought. The spinal damage is progressing, and she needs emergency surgery within the next 6 hours. Then get her to a hospital that can. The surgery costs $400,000, and it's experimental. Insurance won't cover it, and the only surgeon qualified to perform it is Dr. Marcus Chun at Johns Hopkins. For $100,000. Even if I sold everything I owned, liquidated my business, and borrowed against future earnings, I couldn't come close to that amount. Jake, there has to be another option. There is. Richard Blackwood called Agent Santos 10 minutes ago. He's offering to pay for Emma's surgery, transport her to Johns Hopkins, and cover all medical expenses. In exchange for what? Your silence. Emma's testimony disappears. Derek pleads to a reduced charge, and everyone walks away alive. I stood in that parking garage, surrounded by chaos and unconscious contractors, facing an impossible choice. Accept Richard Blackwood's blood money and watch Derek escape justice for destroying Emma's life, or refuse his offer and watch Emma die from injuries that were completely preventable. Agent Santos' voice came through my phone. Mr. Miller, you need to decide quickly. Dr. Chun can perform the surgery tonight, but Emma's window for successful treatment is closing rapidly. The moral weight of the decision felt heavier than any battlefield choice I'd ever made. In Afghanistan, the enemy was clear, the mission was defined, and success meant bringing everyone home alive. This was different. This was choosing between justice and family, between revenge and love, between what was right and what was necessary. Agent Santos, if I accept Blackwood's offer, does Derek walk free? Derek pleads guilty to leaving the scene of an accident. 18 months in minimum security prison, 5 years probation. And if I refuse? Derek faces federal charges for vehicular assault, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. 25 years to life. 25 years to life, or Emma's life. The choice should have been simple, but as I looked at my phone displaying the contact information for Johns Hopkins Hospital, I realized Richard Blackwood had finally found a weapon I couldn't fight. Standing in that parking garage, surrounded by unconscious contractors and the chaos of a fake evacuation, I realized Richard Blackwood had finally found a weapon that could defeat me: my love for Emma. $400,000 for experimental spinal surgery. The only chance Emma had of walking again, held hostage by the man whose son had destroyed her life. Agent Santos, I need to speak with Emma before I make any decisions. Mr. Miller, there's no time. Dr. She needs an answer within the hour, or Emma loses her surgical window permanently. But as I started to dial the secure facility where Emma was being held, Jake's voice crackled through my earpiece with urgency that made my blood run cold. Austin, don't accept Blackwood's offer. It's not what you think. What do you mean? I just intercepted communications between Richard Blackwood and someone at Johns Hopkins. The surgery isn't meant to save Emma. It's meant to kill her. The parking garage seemed to spin around me. Explain. Dr. Marcus Chun is legitimate, but Richard Blackwood has people inside Johns Hopkins. The plan is for Emma to die during surgery from unforeseen complications. They eliminate the key witness against Derek while appearing to be generous benefactors trying to help. Agent Santos' voice came through my phone, apparently having heard Jake's transmission. Mr. Miller, we've been monitoring Blackwood communications as well. Jake is correct. This is an assassination disguised as medical treatment. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Richard Blackwood wasn't offering to save Emma's life. He was planning to murder her in an operating room, surrounded by witnesses who would testify that he'd done everything possible to help. Agent Santos, what are my real options here? We have Dr. Patricia Williams at Georgetown University Medical Center. She's performed similar surgeries with a 90% success rate. But Georgetown won't accept the case without payment guarantees, and your insurance specifically excludes experimental procedures. How much does Georgetown want? $200,000 up front, another $200,000 if complications arise during surgery. $400,000 that I didn't have, couldn't borrow, and couldn't earn in time to save Emma's life. That's when Jake said something that changed everything. Austin, what if we don't need Richard Blackwood's money? What do you mean? I mean, what if there's another source of funding that Blackwood doesn't control? Agent Santos seemed to understand what Jake was suggesting. Mr. Miller, the federal government has a victim compensation fund for cases involving public corruption. If we can prove Derek's case involved judicial bribery and police misconduct, Emma's medical expenses become a federal responsibility. How long does that process take? Normally, 18 months. But if we can expedite the corruption investigation, we might get emergency funding approval within 72 hours. 72 hours. Emma needed surgery within 6 hours, according to the medical timeline. There has to be another way. That's when Agent Santos revealed information that changed the entire game. Mr. Miller, there might be. We've been investigating Judge Catherine Wells for 2 years, waiting for the right case to build federal charges. Her son Michael's involvement in Derek's hit and run gives us probable cause to search her financial records. What are you looking for? Evidence of bribery payments from the Blackwood family. If we can prove Judge Wells accepted money to cover up Derek's previous crimes, we can freeze all Blackwood family assets as proceeds from criminal activity, including the money they're offering for Emma's surgery, including everything. But Mr. Miller, there's something else. We found Ashley Pierce, Derek's passenger. She's agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Ashley Pierce, the woman who'd told Derek to keep driving after hitting Emma, who'd called Judge to coordinate the cover-up while Emma lay bleeding in the street. What is Ashley willing to testify about? Everything. Judge Wells has been taking bribes from the Blackwood family for 3 years. Detective Jones received monthly payments to bury investigations. Ashley Pierce was present during at least 6 meetings where Richard Blackwood discussed eliminating witnesses to protect his son. The federal case was bigger than Emma's hit and run. It was a massive corruption investigation that could bring down judges, police officials, and an entire network of bought influence. Agent Santos, How soon can you arrest Judge Wells? We're executing search warrants right now. But Mr. Miller, once we move against Wells, Richard Blackwood will know his entire operation is compromised. He'll escalate from bribes and threats to direct violence. As if summoned by her words, my phone rang with Richard Blackwood's number. Mr. Miller, I understand you've been speaking with federal agents about my generous offer to help your sister. Mr. Blackwood, I know about Johns Hopkins. I know about Dr. Chun. I know you're planning to kill Emma during surgery. A long silence. Mr. Miller, you've become remarkably well-informed for a construction worker. I've become remarkably motivated to protect my family from murderers. Unfortunately, your sister's condition is deteriorating rapidly. According to my medical consultants, she has perhaps 4 hours before permanent paralysis becomes irreversible. Your medical consultants are lying. Are they? Dr. Wells at Memorial Hospital just informed me that Emma suffered another spinal episode. She's being prepped for emergency transport to Johns Hopkins as we speak. My blood turned to ice. Emma's at a federal safe house. Is she? Mr. Miller, I think you'll find that my resources extend further than you realized. I was running toward my truck before Richard Blackwood finished his threat, Jake right behind me. If the Blackwood family had located Emma at the federal safe house, if they had people inside the medical transport system, then Emma was in immediate danger. Agent Santos was shouting into her radio, coordinating with federal marshals, but I could hear the panic in her voice. Richard Blackwood had anticipated our moves, and Emma was walking into a trap disguised as life-saving medical treatment. The race to save my sister's life had become a race against a billion-dollar conspiracy that reached into every level of government and law enforcement. And I had less than 4 hours to stop them from killing the only witness who could bring Derek Blackwood to justice. Jake and I raced toward the federal safe house where Emma was supposed to be protected, my phone buzzing with updates from Agent Santos that made my blood run colder with each message. Richards Blackwood has people inside the U.S. Marshals Service, Agent Santos said through my hands-free system. The medical transport order for Emma came through official federal channels, but we never authorized it. Which means Emma's being taken to Johns Hopkins right now by people who plan to kill her during surgery. We've got federal marshals en route to intercept the transport, but Austin Blackwood anticipated this. He's been planning this contingency for months. When we reached the safe house, it was empty. Not just Emma. The entire federal protection team had vanished, leaving behind only scattered medical equipment and signs of a hurried departure. Jake found a note pinned to the kitchen table. Emma Miller transferred to Johns Hopkins Medical Center for emergency spinal surgery. Federal authorization #JH 2847. B. Transport completed at 14:30 hours. Austin, that federal authorization number doesn't exist, Agent Santos confirmed over the phone. Someone created fake federal paperwork to kidnap Emma from protective custody. I was back in my truck, driving toward Johns Hopkins, when Agent Santos called with news that changed everything. We just arrested Judge Catherine Wells at her home. She was shredding documents when federal agents arrived, but we recovered enough evidence to prove 3 years of bribery payments from the Blackwood family. What kind of evidence? Bank records showing monthly deposits of $50,000. Email communications with Richard Blackwood about case management, and handwritten notes detailing which cases to dismiss, which prosecutors to pressure, and which witnesses to intimidate. The federal case was finally coming together, but it might be too late to save Emma. Agent Santos, what about Detective Jones? Already in custody. We arrested him an hour ago with $200,000 in cash hidden in his garage, all marked bills from a Blackwood construction account. As I drove toward Johns Hopkins, Jake coordinated with our former Special Forces team members who were positioning themselves around the hospital. But Richard Blackwood had resources we hadn't anticipated. When I arrived at the hospital, there were armed guards at every entrance, all wearing legitimate security uniforms, but moving with military precision. Austin, This is bigger than a medical kidnapping, Jake said through my earpiece. Blackwood has turned Johns Hopkins into a fortress. Professional contractors, electronic surveillance, controlled access to every floor. I parked 6 blocks away and approached the hospital using urban infiltration techniques I'd learned in Iraq. But as I got closer, Agent Santos called with an update that stopped me cold. Austin, we found Ashley Pierce. She's been murdered. What? She was supposed to be in federal custody. She was. Someone got to her in the federal holding facility. Made it look like suicide, but the forensics don't match. Ashley Pierce was killed to prevent her testimony. The Blackwood family had eliminated their star witness, leaving Emma as the only person who could testify about Derek's involvement in the hit and run. Agent Santos, if Ashley's dead, Emma's testimony becomes even more crucial, which is why Richard Blackwood will do anything to silence her permanently. I made it to Johns Hopkins service entrance using delivery truck cover, but what I found inside the hospital made me realize the scope of Blackwood's operation. This wasn't just about killing Emma during surgery. This was about eliminating every witness, every federal agent, and every piece of evidence connected to Derek's case. The hospital's entire 6th floor had been cleared of regular patients and staff, replaced with Blackwood's contractors posing as medical personnel. Emma was somewhere in that controlled environment, probably already prepped for surgery that would end her life. But as I prepared to infiltrate the 6th floor, my phone rang with a call that changed everything. Austin, this is Emma. Em, where are you? Are you safe? I'm in operating room 6. But Austin, I'm not here for surgery. I'm here as bait. What do you mean? Richard Blackwood is using me to draw you into the hospital so his contractors can eliminate both of us. The whole medical emergency was fake. My spinal injury is serious, but not immediately life-threatening. Emma had figured out Blackwood's trap, but she was still in the middle of it, surrounded by people who wanted her dead. Em, can you get out of there? Not without help. They have me under guard, but Austin, I overheard something. Richard Blackwood isn't just trying to protect Derek from this case. Derek's hit and run was connected to a much bigger crime. What kind of bigger crime? Money laundering, drug trafficking. Richard Blackwood has been using his construction company to wash money for organized crime families. Derek's reckless behavior threatened to expose the entire operation. The pieces finally clicked into place. Derek's hit and run wasn't just about a rich kid avoiding consequences. It was about protecting a billion-dollar criminal enterprise that reached into every level of government and law enforcement. Emma, we need to get you out of there and into real federal protection. Austin, there's something else. I heard Richard Blackwood talking to someone about eliminating the federal problem. He's not just targeting witnesses. He's planning to kill Agent Santos and anyone else who knows about the corruption investigation. Agent Santos' voice crackled through my earpiece. Austin, we've got problems. Our entire federal task force has been compromised. Someone leaked our investigation details to the Blackwood family. The corruption reached into the FBI itself. Richard Blackwood had been buying federal agents the same way he'd bought local police and judges. Agent Santos, get out of there. They're coming for you next. But it was too late. Through my phone, I could hear gunfire, shouting, and Agent Santos calling for backup that might never arrive. The federal case against the Blackwood family was collapsing in real time, taking Emma's only chance for justice with it. And I was standing outside a hospital that had become a fortress, knowing that Emma was inside waiting for me to attempt a rescue that Richard Blackwood had spent months planning to turn into our execution. Standing outside Johns Hopkins, I realized that everything I'd learned in 10 years of Special Forces combat came down to this moment. Not the tactics, not the weapons training, not the ability to disappear into shadows, but the one lesson that mattered most. Sometimes the best way to protect the people you love is to trust them to protect themselves. Emma was inside that hospital, surrounded by Richard Blackwood's contractors, but she wasn't helpless. She was a trauma nurse who'd spent years treating combat wounds, Someone who understood better than anyone how to stay alive in impossible situations. And she'd already given me the key to destroying the Blackwood family's entire operation. I called Agent Santos, hoping she was still alive after the gunfight I'd heard through my phone. She answered on the first ring, breathing hard but determined. "Austin, I'm okay. Blackwood's people tried to eliminate our federal task force, but we were ready for them. It turns out Derek wasn't the only one willing to talk." "What do you mean?" "Michael Wells, Judge Wells' son, cut a deal with federal prosecutors 20 minutes ago. He's providing evidence about the entire corruption network. Judges, police officials, federal agents, everyone who's been taking Blackwood money." "What about Emma?" "We're moving on the hospital right now. Full federal response team, not the compromised agents who've been feeding information to Blackwood." As Agent Santos explained the federal operation, my phone rang with another call. "Emma." "Austin, I need you to listen carefully. I'm not in operating room 6 anymore." "Where are you?" "Hidden in the hospital's medical records room. I overheard Richard Blackwood talking to someone about eliminating all witnesses within the next hour. They're not just planning to kill me during fake surgery. They're planning to blow up this entire floor to destroy evidence." "Get out of there now." "I can't. They have explosives planted throughout the 6th floor, and I'm the only one who knows where they are. If I leave, when the FBI raids this hospital, dozens of federal agents will die." Emma had done something typically selfless and terrifyingly brave. She'd stayed behind to save the people trying to save her. "Austin, I need you to get this information to Agent Santos. Room 604, 608, 612, in the main electrical junction. Richard Blackwood has C4 planted in all 4 locations, enough to bring down the entire 6th floor." I was already running toward the hospital as I relayed Emma's information to Agent Santos. The federal raid was 30 minutes away, but the explosives could detonate at any moment if Richard Blackwood felt cornered. "Agent Santos, I'm going in after Emma." "Austin, you'll compromise the entire operation." "The operation is already compromised. Richard Blackwood has been planning this endgame for months, and he's willing to kill federal agents to protect his criminal empire." I entered Johns Hopkins through the same service entrance I'd used before, but this time I wasn't trying to stay hidden. This time I was hunting. The first contractor I encountered was monitoring security cameras from a supply closet on the 3rd floor. He never saw me coming, and he never got a chance to warn his team that their perimeter had been breached. The 2nd and 3rd contractors were positioned at stairwell access points, controlling movement between floors. Military training is about speed, surprise, and violence of action. All 3 contractors were unconscious and zip-tied before they knew they were under attack. I reached the 6th floor to find Richard Blackwood standing in the main corridor, no longer pretending to be a concerned benefactor. He was wearing tactical gear and holding a remote detonator, surrounded by the last 4 contractors who'd been guarding Emma. "Mr. Miller, I was wondering when you'd arrive." "Mr. Blackwood, it's over. The federal investigation, the corruption charges, Derek's testimony, all of it leads back to you." "Perhaps. But dead witnesses can't testify, and destroyed evidence can't convict." Richard Blackwood held up the detonator. "This device is connected to enough C4 to eliminate everyone on this floor. Your sister, the federal agents will be here soon, and any evidence connecting my family to criminal activity, including you. I'm a patriot, Mr. Miller. Sometimes patriots make sacrifices to protect what matters most." That's when Emma's voice came from behind him. "The only thing you've ever protected is your son's ability to hurt innocent people." Emma emerged from medical records room, moving slowly due to her injuries, but carrying something that made Richard Blackwood's face go white with rage. A thick file folder containing documents that would destroy his family's criminal empire. "That's impossible. Those files were destroyed. Hospital computer systems automatically back up to off-site servers," Emma said calmly. "Every financial document, every email, every piece of evidence connecting you to bribing judges and police officials. I've been copying it for the past hour. Richard Blackwood raised the detonator, his finger poised over the trigger. Then everyone dies. My family's legacy doesn't end with disgrace. But before he could detonate the explosives, the sixth floor's main elevator opened, and Agent Santos stepped out with a federal SWAT team, all wearing bomb disposal gear. Mr. Blackwood, we've been disabling your explosives for the past 10 minutes. Your detonator isn't connected to anything anymore. The look on Richard Blackwood's face when he realized his final weapon was useless will stay with me forever. Decades of buying influence, intimidating witnesses, and destroying lives had led to this moment, standing in a hospital corridor, surrounded by federal agents, holding a piece of plastic that couldn't save him. Richard Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, attempted murder, and about 30 other federal charges that'll keep you in prison for the rest of your life. 6 months later, I sat with Emma in a courtroom as Derek Blackwood was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Judge Catherine Wells received 15 years. Detective Jones got 10 years. Richard Blackwood was sentenced to life without parole. Emma's surgery at Georgetown University Medical Center was completely successful. She'd walk with a slight limp for the rest of her life, but she was alive, testifying, and whole. The Federal Victim Compensation Fund covered all her medical expenses, plus damages that allowed her to open her own medical practice specializing in trauma recovery. Rachel and Lucy returned from Phoenix after the trials ended. Our family had survived, scarred but stronger, bonded by something more powerful than fear or revenge. The knowledge that we'd chosen love over hatred, justice over vengeance. As for me, I started a nonprofit organization helping other families fight corrupt cover-ups, using the skills Special Forces had given me to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Derek Blackwood thought he could destroy our family because his father had money and influence. But he underestimated what happens when you threaten someone who spent 10 years learning that the most powerful weapon isn't violence. It's the refusal to let evil win. Emma walks with purpose now, not despite her injuries, but because of what they taught her about survival. Rachel and I are rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of trust we'd never had before. And Lucy knows her father fought for family when it mattered most. The Blackwood name is now synonymous with corruption and downfall. Our family name means something different: resilience, justice, and the unbreakable bond between people who choose to protect each other above everything else. Some battles are won with weapons. Others are won with truth. The most important victories come when you realize that protecting the people you love doesn't require you to destroy yourself in the process. Story is finished. Looking back on Austin and Emma's incredible journey, I have to ask you something that's been weighing on my heart. If your family faced the kind of systematic corruption and threats that Austin endured, would you have the strength to keep fighting when it felt like the entire system was rigged against you? Or would there come a point where you'd accept defeat to protect the people you love most? I'm genuinely curious to know which city and country you're joining us from today. Please share your location in the comments below.